Grüezi ragazzi, welcome e bienvenue to Cannabis Economics LinkedIn Live for this week. To those of you joining us live, thank you very much for being here with us today. And for those of you who will be checking out the recording at a later time, also a big thank you to you. We hope, of course, that you enjoy it and that you perhaps leave the session having learned something new. Before we get started, a little bit of information about Cannabis Economics. Cannabis Economics aims to combat the bottlenecks of the medical cannabis industry using the power of education and through the training of healthcare professionals on the effective use of cannabinoid medicines. In doing so, increasing access to medical cannabis for patients around the world. On your screen right now, you see an overview of the typical project cycle when we develop CME or CPD or whatever the relevant accreditation is in that particular jurisdiction, when we develop educational modules with our partners. So if this is something that you're interested in helping to do your part in educating physicians and driving adoption, then please feel free to get in touch with us. Another thing that we're also extremely proud about and very excited over is the Principles of Clinical Cannabinology Handbook, which we released just over a month ago. And the response has been absolutely phenomenal, and we are extremely grateful for everyone that has supported us and purchased a copy of the book. If you're interested in a copy of the book, also please feel free to scan the QR code here to learn more about the book and also how you can get your copy. And now, without further ado, I would like to first of all, if you would like to get in touch with us, here's that information also. And we would just like to also make the quick point that we wholeheartedly believe that through education we increase adoption, through increased adoption we increase access, and through increased access we help more patients. And so now, if you'd like to get in touch with us, please feel free. And without further ado, I would like to take a moment now to introduce the topic that we will be discussing today. We're going to be speaking about cannabis economics, touching also on the regulations of cannabis markets, including the different types of forms that we see here, which is industrial use, CBD, medical and adult use. And with us today is Davide Fortin, PhD. And Davide, I'm going to pass it on to you. Maybe you can give us an intro about yourself and also a little bit of a background. And also, before we continue, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. And I, for one, am certainly looking forward to what we're going to be discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bijan. And hello, everyone. I'm really thankful for the invitation here. Because today I'm going to talk about mostly cannabis economics, which is something I've been working on for a few years right now. So how did I start working on this? I mean, I've been finishing my PhD last year, so it took like quite some time to finish. But my research has been mostly working on the different type of markets and mostly on market design, so how to regulate these markets. So I started looking at the recreational or adult use market because it was what I thought it was more interested at this time when I started it. But then I realized there is much more to do actually in the medical cannabis market, which is what I've been focusing, and I'm focusing right now also in my postdoc. But also I've been studying overall like the emergence of the CBD market or like cannabis, which has a lot of interrelation with both the recreational and the medical market. So maybe we'll talk through that later. And finally, a little bit, I've been also touching the industrial hemp market because it's also like related, obviously, mostly to the CBD market. So what I've been researching was actually how different markets and regulation of different markets affect the economics and the functioning of parallel cannabis markets. So that was my main field of research. So that's quite a big thing, but big field. But I've been while doing my PhD, I've been also like working and doing consulting for governments mostly. So, for instance, for Health Canada, I've been working on their market demand estimation For the Colorado government, I've been doing all type of data analysis for monitoring the legalization effort since they were the first country to do so. All of this, I've been doing this collaborating with MPG Consulting. And also I've been working more recently for the Department of Agriculture on the best practices to regulate also the industrial hemp market and CBD. So that's how I got this overview of the all different markets and the problem that exists among this. I'm still working on government consulting, and I'm now working on developing countries at the moment right now, in creating regulation, especially aiming to then export the product to developed market, obviously. So they're not working still on the demand, but mostly on developing the supply. I would say overall, what I've seen just to give an overall view of the economics and how it has changed over since I started my PhD to now that I'm at a postdoc. Basically, the economics of these markets depend mostly on the regulation. So how the regulation, obviously they open new markets, so they create a legal demand, and of course then there is a supply that satisfies that. So what I've seen, compared to maybe the last time I had the podcast with you, Viola, big changes happen in relation to the hype that was going on in 2018 with the legalization in Canada, when the estimation of the demand were not really precise. There was some big hype. So they estimated also the capacity of the legal market to capture the black markets. They were very optimistic expectations, which reveal not that true. And I've been recently to a conference of the International Society of the Study for Drug Policy, where there was the biggest new evidence on how black market was captured, and we see that it's really depending also of how provinces also have regulated it, and how the different type of product have been allowed or not allowed. So there is it's really about how you also regulate the supply that help you to capture the legal demand disrupt the black market. So now the expectation have been a little bit they're more closer to equilibrium over the years. There is more information of how this legal market work. It's interesting to see that I can work in markets that are closer to where I'm right now. So I'm in France. So perhaps Germany will open it. Malta has opened, although it didn't really develop the authorization at the moment. So it's for the Cannabis Club. But there is something that is coming very close. Czech Republic has been really open about also being able to regulate the market a little bit before Germany, just to be able to export there. So there's a lot of so this is an interesting moment for Europe, and I'm really looking forward to see how things will evolve in the future.
Thank you, Davide. Good afternoon to everyone also from my side. So we have seen that you have great expertise in various aspects of the regulatory framework surrounding cannabis, both from the medical regulation aspect and so on. And moreover, I've seen that you have expertise in European as well North American market. So I wonder, which are the principal differences between these two kinds of regulatory framework that we have here in Europe and there in the North American side?
Well, first of all, the American market, as you said, as you know, I guess most know, has been created firstly from a referendum. So there was a referendum, people went to vote, and voting, and they were voting some sort of system that it was proposed in the referendum. So there was not really a space for policymaker to negotiate, to consider the regulation. They had to accept what was there, and they just had to adjust a little bit. So this created basically a totally new way of accessing to medical cannabis product. So that's for instance, the case in Colorado, where in Chufa, that is probably the market I know the most, and is also the first market that actually fully legalized cannabis. keeping the medical market separated from the recreational one. So what we see for the medical market there is that it was basically there was first a model of caregiver. So someone growing for someone else. It was very like a small circle and closed circle. And then in 2009, 10, there was like a Supreme Court decision, which kind of convinced people that the resources for enforcing against medical cannabis would not have used for people that are using it medically. They would shift this, and this created like from a day to the other like dispensary opening everywhere. So the dispensary were there before the regulation, actually. So they try to regulate the dispensary in Colorado and in other countries, but they basically don't treat them as normal medication that go through clinical trial and they get approved. They're just anything you can, anything that has cannabis, any cannabis-based product can be sold and can be kind of sold to patients. And also patients.
Sorry, Davide. Yes. So in Colorado, you don't have any distinction between the various kind of pathologies that can be treated with medical cannabis. I mean, it can be prescribed for every condition.
So it's not prescribed actually in Colorado, and in the US in general is recommended, which is a different type of. It's like it's still a physician that must do that, but it's not. The physician doesn't take all the responsibilities when you do recommendation that you take when a physician in Europe do a prescription. So basically, and so it doesn't really go through the dosage and things like that. Although in certain cases they can recommend certain dosage, but they're not really going in the details on that. And because of that, the product are not really controlled. There is not a lot of product control also in the analysis, in the content and things like that. Although it has improved over time, obviously, but basically the dispensaries are selling whatever product as based on cannabis, different variety, and they can give any variety to the patients, so they don't have to give like specific chemotype with like high THC or high CBD or things like that. And the number of pathologies for which you can prescribe is restricted, but it's expanding. But you need to have like one in Colorado is like 1 out of 11 now. Different condition you can have for that, but in some states there are 40 different conditions you can have for a recommendation. But having said that, so they create basically a specific type of framework for medical cannabis. While in Europe, what they did was to try to integrate medical cannabis in the pharmaceutical traditional framework, which was kind of impossible. And then they realized that they had to go through some sort of compassionate model. So they allow like flowers, even though there was no clinical trial on flowers, on the flowers that are sold. But still, the model is a little bit more under control because there is a prescription first, because you have the physician prescribed chemotype. So pharmacy have to give this type of product. They cannot really give other types legally. And also in Europe, there is a possibility of reimbursement for certain conditions. You know better than me that it varies among European countries and even among like Italian regions. But there is a possibility to have reimbursement. While in the US, this is basically impossible. There are like some specific program for veterans, like also in Canada, but it's very, very difficult to obtain a reimbursement for the product that you are for the medication. Even though this is a therapy. So this is one of the differences that we see. So the fact also is that because of how the model is written in the US,
according to you, from an economic point of view, which of these models work better?
I mean, if you're depending on your objective, if your objective is to treat as many patients as possible and allow patients to find the best treatment for their condition, the American model is better because you have a wider variety of product, because the product have less, there is less issue about the accuracy of the content. So you have like very different much product. The price is a little bit cheaper if you, assuming you don't get reimbursement in Europe, like the price is cheaper. There are different types also of mean of consumption. So you have capsule, you have like a wide variety of cannabis-based medication in the US. In Europe, this is limited because the way you have to get approved from health authority, which takes like big time in Europe. On the other hand, so this is so if you want to specify, this is positive. But on the other hand, there is a bigger diversion of medical cannabis to maybe not medical strictly medical users. So this is actually why the European model is more strict. But at the same time, there is an advantage that you have reimbursement for people that have real need, like multiple sclerosis or epilepsy, and this is very positive. And in Germany, also other condition, they can have actually condition. I mean, they have reimbursement. So I think there are good and bad sides. Obviously, if the European model would allow a wide variety of products, it would be able to compete better with the American model, which I think is going to go to this direction, but maybe it's going to take decades, and then it might be complicated. So if a patient is in need of a specific variety, a specific chemotype, it might not be able to find it in the pharmacy, and it might go to the
black market.
It doesn't find it.
I'm gonna actually try to divert this conversation back to the original topic, which is really like getting into economics. And since we're streaming from, I know Bijan is on the other side of the world in this moment, but Cannabis is a European company, so our focus is a lot in here. And you wrote a publication which was titled, "Can the Cannabis Social Club Model be a buffer against market distortions?" And I find that very interesting, especially in this moment where in Germany now it's basically applied what's the Spanish model. I was wondering if you could provide us with more details about what's actually the Cannabis Social Club model and especially not so much on a regulatory aspect, but mainly what it means for its potential in sort of mitigating market distortions, which I think we just brushed on at the beginning of when you introduced yourself, but between 2018 and now, anyone that has been around in this industry for a while has seen a very, very big difference in how things are moving. And the other thing that I wanted to add on top of this, to make a sort of economic differentiation between the medical market, is that, as we know, the international medical market is basically pharma. And when we look at where is the attention of pharma in terms of who is driving the efforts within cannabis, are not even the countries that actually have in place a true regulation. Because the 3 countries that have financed the most clinical trials on earth are UK, Ireland, and USA. 3 countries where there is no rec market. I mean, in the States there is, but not even on a federal level. So, but on the other side, you may argue that they have quite stronger financial market in place that have nothing to do with cannabis. So perhaps, yes, regulations are definitely important, but maybe that's not the full story.
Yes, there is also like some very particular cases, like when you mentioned, the US is definitely the leader in pharmaceutical research in any probably type of medication and condition. So the US is always like at the top for pharmaceutical, because also their pharmaceutical model is I'll let you have very high monopoly price compared to any other country in the world. So it makes more sense to do research there in terms of pharma in general. So there is also some regulation involved on that. In terms of UK and Ireland, definitely like the situation in the UK was the first country that actually decided to, where there was a company that had the permission to do a real pharmaceutical product. So yeah, and they have like very good connection also at the high level at the governments, the people involved with the company. So I think that helped the UK to be where it is. And the goal of every pharmaceutical company is actually to supply their product and to make profits. So they decided to do this in the UK because they had like a more favorable situation. But obviously their market destination, which I think is GW, what you mentioned, the company is all over the world, because obviously every country that doesn't want to let some special type of regulation for cannabis, like compassionate model, they will have to buy it from GW. So you needed to have a leader in this market, which is in the UK. They're located, but in terms of research, the research for the clinical research on cannabis is a big issue. Besides for these very few cases where a company like GW have been doing some research, mostly using isolated cannabinoids in combination or alone, but the issue is that we have some research on this type of product like Sativex or Pidiolex, but we don't have really much of a research on product or the product that is most used actually from patients even in a regulated market like Germany, because or Italy, which are the flowers. So or as they call it in pharmaceutical term, floss, on inflorescences. So these products are not really being studied very much clinically, because of what in economics we call a market failure on the private incentive for clinical research. So there is not enough incentive for private company to do actually study on flowers because of the issue with patenting these flowers after. So to be able to invest these hundreds of millions that a clinical trial like well done in 3 phase goes through, to be able then to get back the investment that you do, because if everybody can, after appropriate of the knowledge you created with your trials, and say, okay, I have a similar flower with similar cannabinoids, so why don't you use my flowers as well? And of course, with pharmaceutical standard and stuff. So the risk that you do a lot of research for then other company to be able to exploit it and use it, because even like if you have a perfect flower and you prove that this flower works really well on a condition which there is no other pharmaceutical, for instance, I'm thinking about dementia. If you find a perfect flower that works on dementia, it's going to be very hard in 1 or 2 years to be able to actually reproduce the same flowers, because the condition of cultivation are a bit different. So you need to give an approximation, even yourself, like of how much the cannabinoid content are. So other company can just do the same and find other flower and copy that. So because of this risk, no companies really do research on flowers. So
probably this is the reason why we don't have a lot of randomized clinical trials in the field of medical cannabis, because companies are not pushed to invest on flower, as you were saying, because they cannot patent flowers, so they don't receive back their investment on
totally.
flowers.
In fact, phase 3 and phase 4 are purely IP driven. So, and this is, pretty clear. But I want to bring you back, come back to us, to Germany and Spain, because I think this is really juicy, because we've seen so many companies. No, I know. That's why I'm here. I've seen a lot of, we all seen a lot of companies really looking at Germany opening as the opening of a large scale economics for rec for Europe. But then the model that now it's currently under discussion, it's actually a model that resembles that of Spain, although in Spain it's unregulated, where sales are not really available. So what's your take on this as an economist? Because you wrote about this years ago, so kind of you foresee all of this.
Yeah, actually, the book I advise to look is a book called Cannabis Social Club, which I published. I wrote a chapter of this about this mechanism of Cannabis Club being able to make the market more efficient. So in very small word, there is an effect that Cannabis Club can have in a regulated market where there are pharmacy and dispensaries, commercial seller and pharmacy for patients. So the Cannabis Club would work for those kind of consumers in between. That's how my model works. So as I said, there are different regulations. Actually, all Uruguay regulated Cannabis Club. But the idea that I wrote with a theoretical model and stuff is that there are certain users in the recreational market, so that would go to commercial dispensary, that would be attracted from Cannabis Club for different reasons. But what is important to recognize is that this Cannabis Club have also a non-profit motives compared to this dispensary. So especially for those that are very regular consumer, daily or almost daily consumer, would be a better way to obtain the product, because being a non-profit, there is less of an incentive for dispensary to get you really to bring this consumer to problematic use, because there is not an interest in terms of profits. So it would be like a harm reduction sort of context. But what is more interesting for me and from my economic point of view and for the healthcare system is that you would take away a lot of those that would go to medical market, to physician, and perhaps kind of to physicians that don't know about medical cannabis, many cases, and kind of use their time and the resources of this physician to get maybe a prescription for a product that actually the physician don't really know which product to give. Now you have a very nice book which will educate physician, and this problem will probably decrease with the future. But there is a lot of this vision that they really don't know, and so actually it's the patient that tell them what to do. And so it's one of the few medication where the patient is coming already with an idea and knows more about the product, because most of the time he has been trying to decide to move to that. So the club would kind of take these patients away from the medical market, and in this way reduce the distortion of physician just losing their time giving prescription based on what the patient is asking first. But also it would create like an alternative type of product for that you maybe are not available in pharmacy, and perhaps you can wide the range of genetics, because we estimate between 600 and 1,000 genetics at the moment in the market for THC and CBD. So if the pharmacy cannot have all of them, but if there is one that works better for certain condition, then the patients can go also through them and get this product. At the same time, it would work also for those conditions where there is no clinical evidence, and so where you would find also difficult for physician to prescribe you, because they are like, we don't have evidence on that. And so these patients could go to the cannabis club and obtain their product for them, rather than to have to go to the dispensary, perhaps when it's in a fully regulated market, because dispensary also have a high tax normally compared to club or pharmacy. And so it would be also like ethical, to get like these patients to a cheaper product for a treatment for a cheaper cost.
Okay, that's interesting. I did not actually, because in my eyes as a European, I guess, I didn't see a huge difference, apart from, of course, basis of being a member and not being a member and being a client. But other than that, I didn't see like a huge difference. But on the approach, but clearly, yes, there is a fiscal huge difference in between an association and a shop. So yes, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Well, yeah, this is my theoretical model. So I theorize that you should not have a higher price for cannabis club compared to dispensary, because cannabis club can be, if cannabis club have to attract heavy, like regular daily users, they cannot be more expensive of dispensary, because otherwise people would go all to dispensary. So there must be a reason for them to go there, and this
also compared to the black market should be lower the prices. Otherwise, people will go on to go to black market if they have a cheaper prices and cheaper products.
Obviously that would help, but I think there is another sort of added value when you buy to a cannabis club, which is the fact that you have a more not standardized, but you have a more reliable sort of source of your product. While the black market, you don't really know where the product is coming from. You don't know if it's the same genetics. In some cases you do, but most of the cases you don't. In cannabis club in general, they always have the same variety. As long as they're selling and there is an interest of the demand, they're going to be able to produce it again. So there is a reproducibility, and for people that use it medically, you have like you can have the same variety for longer period. And so this is another good another benefit of this model.
Okay, Davide, since we are approaching at the end of this live, I would like to ask a last question about black market and legal market, because I know that you conducted researches on the economic implication of cannabis legalization. So according to you, which is the potential economic impact of cannabis legalization in Europe or in significant markets such as Germany, France, or Italy? Talking about the real numbers.
Yeah, I haven't been looking at the moment for like the European market overall, but we are talking definitely many hundreds of thousands of, if not maybe 1 million, even like people that would be employed. in the all European market, but it's we can talk between like 400,000 to 1 million or more, but it depends also how effective is the cannabis for many conditions, because if we figure out that it's so effective as for all the conditions for which it is used, then the market is more. But we are talking about a huge a very important impact in terms of employment and obviously in terms of tax, but also an indirect impact on crime, because it would allow you would give less profits, like criminal association would be able to make lower profits, which makes them less able to invest in violence for the market to be able to rule the market. So you would have a lot of indirect impact that are positive, like lower cost for police, lower cost for so the police could focus on something else, but lower people in prison and things like that. But the employment part is going to be mostly related to the retail part. So the actual final distribution, that will be, especially if they create a model where you have a sort of minimal prevalence of cannabis sales, so sort of specialized shops like in the US, or so if you sell it through pharmacy, like it seems they might want to do in some European country, that might not create the same effect. But I doubt that country will go through this in the long term, because it's not very sustainable. Also, pharmacy are not knowledgeable on that, and they don't have the space. But so the cultivation side, the production side is also very important. But the size of the employment in production will depend also on the type of licensing that will be produced. If you will allow micro licensing or just large, so that will give different employment opportunities, and also the transformation part, which might increase, but that could be also the part of the transformation of flowers in something else. That could be done there could be some synergy of people doing it also for other plants using the same machinery. So that's a little bit that's definitely a lower impact on the transformation, but very large added value. I don't know if that's what you.
David,
thank you, David.
I'm going to jump in at this point. I think, honestly, as is often the case with many of our guests, if we had an open-ended session here, I'm sure we could continue speaking for hours, especially with all the different perspectives that you bring to the table. I want to thank everybody on this note for joining us today. Also, a big shout out to Liliane Malencini for her comments and questions, and commercial rollout at a later stage, 5 to 7 years. Liliane, you, in my opinion, hit the nail on the head, absolutely. And I think we should maybe, as somebody that resides at least part of the time in Germany, I think that it might be interesting, Davide, to have you back just to talk about Germany one day, because that's very, it's a hot topic at the moment, and there's a big debate about the effects of legalization in the black market, also the commercial aspect of running the social clubs. So I think we need to have you back. So thank you very much for coming today. Extremely informative. Thank you also to everybody that watched or will be tuning in later. Thank you also to my awesome team, and we will see you next week for your weekly Cannabis Scienza LinkedIn Live. Grazie mille a tutti, and see you next week. Ciao.
Thank you. Have a good day.